But when he looked at the girl and her mother, both alive, both holding on, he felt strength return to him. They had escaped the heart of the nest. But the fight for their lives was far from over. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the leader. As it spread its wings again, the hunters circled like vultures above, waiting for the command. The nest was falling, the cliff breaking apart. And yet, the human stood tall, knife in hand, his eyes blazing with fire. This was not the end. This was the beginning of their escape, and he would not stop until he had torn the girl and her mother from the claws of the sky forever. The storm raged across the cliffs. Lightning split the sky, painting the world in flashes of white fire. The nest above was crumbling, burning with green light as the crystals shattered. Pieces of bone and stone rained down, falling into the endless abyss below. The human stood on the narrow ledge, his body covered in cuts and bruises. His knife glistened in his blood-stained hand. Beside him the girl clung to her mother, both trembling but alive. And above them the sky hunter leader spread its enormous wings, its red eyes glowing with fury. "You cannot escape, human," the leader growled, its voice shaking the stones. "You have wounded the nest, you have shamed us before our flock, but tonight, you and your fragile flesh will be nothing more than ash." The hunters circled. Overhead, their screams sharp as blades. The girl buried her face in her mother's torn robes, whispering through tears, "Please, don't let him die." The human tightened his grip on the knife. He could feel his strength slipping, his body crying out for rest. But when he looked at the girl's silver eyes filled with fear and hope, he knew he had one last fight left inside him. The leader lunged, its wings battering the air. The human dove aside, rolling across the stone. The claws smashed into the ledge, breaking chunks of rock loose. Dust and sparks flew into the storm. The human struck, his knife slicing across the creature's wing joint. The leader screamed in rage, spinning to strike him with its tail. The blow sent him crashing into the wall, pain exploding through his ribs. He struggled to stand, coughing blood, but his eyes still blazed with fire. The mother raised her hand weakly, sending a blast of light at the leader. It staggered, roaring, but the strike was too small to bring it down. Her body shook, her strength fading fast. Still she stood, her voice firm. "Do not give in, human. You are more than you believe." The leader laughed cruelly. "More? He is nothing. Look at him. Bleeding, broken, ready to fall. This is the end of your so-called savior." But the human pushed himself to his feet, his knife steady in his hand. His voice was low, sharp, unshaken. "You call me nothing, but nothing has cut you. Nothing has burned your nest, and nothing will end you." The leader roared and charged again. The ledge shook as it landed, claws tearing through stone. The hunters screamed above, their wings blotting out the moon. It felt like the sky itself had turned against him. The human braced himself and, at the last second, he dropped low. The leader's strike missed, crashing into the cliff. The rock split, and part of the ledge crumbled away. The human saw his chance. With a fierce cry, he leapt forward and drove his knife deep into the leader's chest. The blade pierced through feathers and flesh, striking the creature's heart. Green blood exploded, hissing as it burned the stone. The leader screamed, its wings thrashing wildly, sending shockwaves through the air. The hunters shrieked in panic as their master staggered. The human clung to the knife, refusing to let go even as the beast thrashed. "Fall," he growled through his teeth. And with one final strike, the leader toppled backward. Its massive body crashed into the burning nest. The explosion of crystal and fire lit the entire sky, and then the leader was gone, swallowed by the abyss. The hunters froze, their cries turning into silence. Their red eyes dimmed, their wings folding in fear. Without their leader, their power was broken. One by one, they turned and fled into the storm. The sky, once full of their shadows, was suddenly empty. The human staggered, his knife falling from his bloody hand. His legs gave way and he dropped to his knees, gasping for breath. The girl ran to him, throwing her arms around his shoulders. "You did it! You saved her! You saved us!" The mother approached slowly, her body weak but her eyes glowing with pride. She knelt before the human, bowing her head deeply. Her voice was steady, though soft. You are no stranger, no wanderer. You are protector. You stood against the sky when no one else dared. And for that my people will honor you as one of our own. The human looked at her, tired but smiling faintly. I'm no hero, he whispered. I just couldn't walk away. The girl shook her head, her silver eyes shining with tears and joy. No, you are more than hero. You are family now. They stood together on the cliff, the storm slowly fading. The green glow of the destroyed nest burned behind them. The air was cleaner, lighter, as if the chains of the sky had broken. As dawn broke, the first rays of sunlight painted the cliff's gold. The girl leaned against the human, her small voice soft. Will you stay with us? We need you. I need you. The human gazed at the horizon, the rising sun warming his tired face. He did not answer at once. Part of him longed to rest, to stay. Another part of him knew the stars still called, and many more battles awaited. At last he spoke, his voice calm but full of promise. For now I will stay, but wherever there are chains, wherever there is fear, that is where I will go. Because no sky, no nest, no monster will ever own us again. The mother and daughter smiled through their tears, and as the sun rose higher, the cliffs no longer felt like a prison. They felt like the beginning of a new dawn, a dawn of respect, a dawn of freedom, a dawn born from the courage of a human who refused to let go. The girl in crisis. The hall was silent yet heavy with fear. Alien guards stood tall at the edges, their armor shining under the cold blue lights. In the middle of the vast alien throne room, a young girl trembled, her small hands pressed tightly, together. Her eyes glistened with tears and her breathing came in sharp, frightened gasps. She was no ordinary child. She was the daughter of the alien queen, the princess of a powerful empire. But in this moment, she was only a scared little girl, lost in a world too cruel for her soft heart. The nobles looked away, pretending not to notice her pain. The guards kept their faces cold, trained to show no kindness. No one dared to move closer. No one dared to comfort her. To touch the princess was forbidden, and many feared the queen's anger if they tried. So the hall stayed frozen, silent, and heartless. The girl's quiet sobs echoed, filling the great space with sorrow. But then, one figure stepped forward. He was not like the others. He was not alien. He was human, a soldier, an outsider, someone who had been allowed into the empire only as a servant of war. He saw the girl's tears, and something in him refused to stay still. He did not see a princess. He did not see danger. He only saw a child in pain, and his heart moved before his mind could stop him. The human knelt down slowly, keeping his hands open and empty. The guards tensed, their weapons buzzing, ready to strike, but the man ignored them, his eyes gentle as he looked at the little girl. She tried to hide her face, but her sobs grew louder. The man reached into his pocket, pulling out something small, something simple. It was a bubble toy, a fragile thing he always carried. He dipped it in soap, lifted it to his lips, and blew. Soft bubbles floated into the air, round and shining with rainbow colors. They drifted gently through the cold hall, glowing in the blue light. The girl gasped, her tears pausing as her wide eyes followed the bubbles. One bubble landed on her hand and popped, making her giggle softly. For the first time, the hall was filled not with silence, but with the small sound of laughter. The nobles stared in shock. The guards froze. No one had ever made the princess smile in such a way. And yet this simple human had done it, not with power, not with command, but with kindness. The man blew more bubbles, sending a small storm. Of them across the throne room, the girl lifted her hand, chasing them, her tears forgotten for the moment. Her tiny fingers reached for them, bursting each one with joy. The human smiled, though he said nothing. He let the bubbles speak for him, soft, harmless, beautiful. The girl's fear melted, replaced by wonder, and for the first time in many days, she felt safe, but unknown to the man. High above the throne room, hidden behind the walls of shadow, Someone was watching. Her gaze was sharp, her presence heavy. It was the alien queen, the mother of the crying girl. Through a secret chamber, she watched everything, her eyes glowing with power. She had seen her daughter cry many times, and no one could ever calm her. Not the guards, not the nobles, not even the wisest healers. But now, one human had done it with nothing but soap and air. The queen's heart burned with confusion. Her pride felt wounded, her mind filled with questions. Why had this outsider succeeded where her strongest failed? Why did her daughter smile at him and not at her own people? The queen's hand tightened on the arm of her throne. Her empire was built on strength, fear, and command. But here was a man who used none of those, and yet her daughter clung to him. The queen's eyes narrowed, her thoughts cold. She would not act yet. She would not reveal herself. Instead, she whispered to herself, "Let us see more. Let us test him." The man, still unaware of the queen's gaze, knelt quietly by the girl. He let her play with the bubbles, smiling gently at her joy. In his heart, he felt no fear of the guards or the nobles. All he wanted was to protect her, to make her feel safe. The hall that had once felt cold now glowed with a strange warmth. The aliens whispered among themselves, fear and curiosity mixing in their eyes. None dared to interrupt. None dared to stop what was happening, because even they could not deny it. The princess was smiling, the first smile in a long time, and it was because of him. The girl reached up, tugging on the human's sleeve, her eyes bright with trust, her voice soft. "More," she whispered. The man nodded, lifted the toy again, and blew. More bubbles rose into the air, floating like tiny stars. The girl laughed, her voice ringing through the chamber. The sound touched everyone, even the guards who tried to stay emotionless. And above, hidden in the shadows, the queen's eyes softened for a single breath. But only for a breath before she closed her heart again, because she knew this human would need to be tested, and his true trial was only beginning. The queen's hidden gaze, high, above the throne room, far from the eyes of the nobles and the guards, a secret chamber glowed with pale blue fire. From this hidden place, the alien queen watched everything. Her throne carved from dark crystal, her long cloak flowing around her like living shadows. Her eyes burned with a cold light as she studied the scene below. She had seen her daughter cry. She had seen her people fail to comfort her. And now she saw a human, an outsider, do what no one else had ever done. The sound of her daughter's small laugh reached her ears through hidden speakers, a laugh born from soap bubbles, not from power or wealth. The queen's heart twisted, though her face remained unreadable. For years she had ruled with strength, with laws sharper than blades, with fear that kept enemies silent. Her empire was vast, her armies countless, her word unbreakable. Yet in this moment all her power meant nothing, because her daughter, her own flesh and blood, smiled not for her people, but for a human. The queen's fingers tapped against the arm of her throne, a slow, dangerous rhythm. No one in her empire dared defy her. No one dared outshine her commands. And yet this fragile creature, this human, had broken the silence with kindness. She leaned forward, her voice low as she whispered to herself, "Why him? Why now?" Her guards in the shadows dared not answer. They knew better than to speak when the queen's mind was working. Her eyes narrowed as she continued to watch. The girl was clinging to the human's sleeve now, refusing to let him go. The guards who once stood proud now seemed powerless, uncertain. The nobles whispered, their voices filled with confusion and jealousy. It was chaos, born from bubbles. The queen's pride ached, but there was something else she could not ignore. Curiosity. For all her wisdom, for all her experience, she could not understand this human's power. It was not the power of fire, or steel, or command. It was something weaker, softer, and yet stronger than all. The power to touch the heart. Her lips pressed together as she made her decision. He would not be punished, not yet. He would be tested. "Bring the first trial," she whispered, her voice like thunder rolling through the secret chamber. The hidden guards bowed low, their armor clinking as they vanished into the dark. Orders had been given, and once the queen gave an order, it was unbreakable. Back in the throne room, the human was still kneeling by the girl, letting her laugh. As she chased the bubbles, he did not know the queen's eyes were on him. He did not know the air itself was shifting, preparing to trap him. The walls hummed softly, a sound too quiet for most ears. But the queen could hear it. Her hidden machines were waking. The trial was about to begin. The queen leaned back on her throne, her voice calm, her expression cold. Let us see what he does when joy turns into fear again. Her eyes softened for only a heartbeat as her gaze moved to her daughter. She loved the girl, more than her empire, more than her throne. But the queen was not weak. She could not allow her heir to depend on outsiders. If this human was truly different, then he would prove it in trial. If not, he would die, and the memory of bubbles would vanish like smoke. The sound of gears echoed deep below the throne room. Hidden doors began to shift, sliding open in silence. Dark machines stirred, their red eyes glowing as they prepared to enter. The queen's heart was steady, her gaze sharp. This was her design, her test, her control. No one could calm her daughter unless she allowed it. And if this human thought he could win her daughter's trust so easily, he was a fool. But even as she thought this, doubt touched her mind. Why had she not ordered him killed immediately? Why had she chosen a test instead? The truth was simple, though she would never admit it aloud. She wanted to know more. She wanted to see why her daughter trusted him. She wanted to see if kindness could truly stand against fear. Perhaps deep inside, she even wanted him to succeed, though her pride would never allow the thought to grow. Below, the girl reached, up again, tugging on the human's sleeve. Her eyes shone with happiness, the fear forgotten. The human nodded, blowing more bubbles, letting them float across the hall. The girl laughed again, her voice pure and sweet, and for the briefest moment, the queen closed her eyes. She remembered when her daughter was born, when she held her for the first time. She remembered the small laugh she had not heard in so long. Her heart ached, and she quickly pushed the memory away. The queen was not weak, not soft. She was iron. She was command. She was the throne. The human would be tested, and only then would she decide. Her eyes opened once more, sharper than blades. The hidden doors creaked wider, the machines ready. The queen's voice whispered like wind across stone. Let the game begin. The throne room was about to change. The air was heavy, the walls alive. If he stays, he could change her, he could change everything. Her fingers curled against the throne. Change is dangerous, change weakens the throne. But then another thought whispered softer. Or perhaps change strengthens it. The whispers of the court grew louder in the days that followed. Some nobles spoke of removing the human quietly. Others argued it would be wiser to let the queen decide his fate. A few even wondered if the human's presence might heal the princess in ways no one else could. But all agreed on one thing. The palace was no longer the same. Every step echoed. With unease, every voice carried both fear and wonder. The human's shadow stretched longer with each passing hour. The princess began to smile more often. She followed the human through the gardens, through the halls, through the chambers of learning. Everywhere she went, she held his sleeve, refusing to let go. When she grew frightened, he blew bubbles and calmed her. When she grew restless, he told her small stories of his own world, stories of oceans, skies, and places far beyond the empire. The girl's laughter returned like sunlight after years of storm, and every time she laughed, the walls of the palace seemed to tremble, because joy was power too. But not everyone welcomed this power. In the dark corners of the court, jealousy burned. One noble, older than the rest, his eyes cold as stone, watched the human with hatred. He had lost his place in the queen's favor long ago, and he saw in this human a chance to strike. If the queen will not remove him, then I will, he whispered. He began to weave a plan, a trap sharp as a blade, and soon the human would walk into it. The whispers of the court turned darker. What had begun as awe was turning into conspiracy. The queen knew this too. Though she said nothing, she heard every whisper, every secret word. Her spies told her of the jealousy, the plotting, the fear. But she allowed it to grow because she too was watching, because she too was testing. The human story was not finished, not yet. And the next trial would not come from her machines. It would come from the shadows. Of the court itself for now, the palace lived in a strange balance. The girl laughed, the human protected. The court whispered. And above it all the queen watched, her eyes like burning stars, her voice soft but sharp as she whispered into the silence. Let them scheme, let them plot. If he is truly different, he will survive even this. The deadly trap. The palace gardens were filled with silver trees and glowing flowers. Streams of liquid light ran between the roots, making the ground shine like stars. It was a place built for peace, for beauty, for calm. But on this day, it would become a battlefield. The human walked slowly with the princess by his side. Her hand clung to his sleeve as always, her steps small and light. She laughed as she chased butterflies of light created by the strange plants. The human smiled, glad to see her joy, glad to see her free from fear. But in the shadows of the tall trees, other eyes watched, eyes filled not with kindness, but with envy and hate. One noble had planned this, an old rival of the queen. His heart burned with jealousy at the human's sudden importance. He had failed many times to win the queen's favor. Now, with the girl's trust given to an outsider, he saw his chance. If the human died here, the queen would not be blamed. It would seem like an accident, an attack in the wild gardens, and so the noble had set the trap. The ground trembled under the garden. Cages opened in the dark earth, releasing creatures bred for war. They were alien beasts, larger than men, with jaws lined with steel teeth. Their bodies were covered in black scales, and their tails whipped the air like whips. Their growls shook the trees, sending birds of fire fleeing into the sky. The princess froze in terror, her laughter silenced in an instant. The human's heart pounded, but he stepped in front of her, his arms spread wide. The beasts stepped from the shadows, their glowing eyes fixed on prey. The nobles watching from hidden balconies smirked, certain the human would fall, but the queen also watched, silent, unreadable. Her daughter's scream reached her ears, cutting into her chest like a blade, yet she did not move. Not yet. This too was a test. The first beast lunged, jaws snapping. The human grabbed a broken branch from the ground and swung with all his strength. The branch cracked against the beast's snout, forcing it back for a moment, but it was not enough. The other beast closed in, circling, growling, their tails striking the ground like drums. The princess sobbed, clinging to his leg. Her voice shook as she cried, "Don't leave me." The human looked down, his face calm despite the storm around them. "I won't leave you, not ever," he whispered. The beasts attacked again, faster, harder. The human dodged, pulled the girl aside. Rolled across the glowing grass, he swung the branch, striking another, sparks flying from its scales. But each strike only slowed them for seconds. He knew he could not defeat them with strength, he needed another way. The girl cried harder, her fear rising again. The beasts fed on fear, their eyes glowing brighter as her sobs grew louder. The human realized the truth. If she panicked, they would grow stronger. If she calmed, they would weaken. So once again, he pulled the bubble toy from his pocket. Even in the middle of death, even with beasts closing in, he chose the same answer. He lifted it to his lips and blew. Bubbles floated into the air, shining under the garden's glowing light. The princess's sobs slowed, her eyes wide as she followed them. Her small hands reached out, forgetting the beasts for a moment. Her fear faded, replaced with wonder once more. The beasts hesitated, confused by the change. Their growls weakened, their steps slowed. The human's heart leapt with hope. He blew again, more. Bubbles rising, drifting between the sharp claws and steel teeth. The princess laughed weakly, her voice shaking but real, and with her laughter the beast faltered high above. The noble watching clenched his fists, furious. "This is impossible," he hissed. The queen's eyes narrowed, her thoughts sharp. The human had turned fear into joy, danger into calm. He had done it again, but the trap was not finished. The noble gave one final signal, and from the far side of the garden, the largest beast emerged. It was twice the size of the others, its body scarred from old battles. Its roar shook the ground, its breath hot and foul. Even the smaller beast stepped back, bowing to its strength. The princess screamed again, terror flooding her small body. The human pulled her behind him, his broken branch shaking in his hand. He knew this time, the bubbles might not be enough. The great beast charged, its claws tearing the ground. The human braced himself, his body trembling with fear, but refusing to run. At the last second, he pushed the girl aside, taking the full strike on his shoulder. Pain exploded through him, but he held his ground. He fell to one knee, the branch shattering in his hand. But even then, he lifted the bubble toy and blew. Bubbles floated through blood and dust, shining in the chaos. The princess's scream stopped, her eyes wide in shock. She saw him bleeding, broken but still smiling, still making bubbles for her. Her tears dried, her small hands lifted, and she stood in front of him. Her voice rang out clear and strong. "Stop!" she shouted at the beast, and for the first time, the beast paused. The nobles gasped in disbelief. The queen's eyes widened slightly, though her face stayed cold. The great beast lowered its head, confused, its strength weakening under the girl's command. She stood tall, small but unshaken, her fear broken, and behind her, the human smiled through the pain, because she was no longer afraid. The noble watching from above cursed, his plan ruined. The queen turned her gaze toward his balcony, her eyes sharp as blades. She knew who had set the trap, she knew who had tried to use her daughter as bait, but her attention returned to the human, bleeding, trembling, yet still blowing bubbles. He had faced death and had not broken, and more than that, he had given her daughter courage. The trial was not only survived, it was conquered. The garden was silent except for the soft sound of bubbles popping. The beasts lowered their heads, defeated not by force but by something greater. The nobles watching felt their pride shatter. The queen whispered softly, though no one else could hear, "Perhaps this human carries a power my empire has forgotten." The queen's test. The throne room was silent, waiting, breathing. The human stood at the center, his clothes torn, his body still aching from the wounds of the garden. Beside him, the princess clung to his sleeve, her eyes full of fierce trust. She refused to let go, even when the great golden doors opened with a thunderous sound. The queen entered, her presence filling the hall like a storm, her cloak dragged across the floor, her crown shining with dark fire. Every noble bowed low, every guard dropped to one knee. Even the air seemed to kneel before her. Only the human remained standing, not out of disrespect, but because he had no strength left to kneel, yet in his eyes there was no fear, only calm. The queen's gaze burned as she stopped before them. Her voice rang across the chamber, sharp and cold. "You have interfered with my court, you have survived my machines, you have faced my beasts, and yet you live." Her eyes shifted to the princess holding tightly to his sleeve. "And my daughter clings to you as if you are her only shield." The words were heavy like chains. The nobles trembled, waiting for her judgment. Would she kill him here before them all? Or would she grant him something more dangerous, her mercy? The human bowed his head slightly, his voice steady. "I did not come to steal your throne, I did not come to take power, I only saw a child crying and I could not ignore her." The queen's eyes narrowed, her thoughts unreadable. "You speak of kindness," she said, "but kindness is weakness, and weakness destroys empires." The hall grew colder. The guards gripped their weapons, but the human did not step back. "Then maybe your empire has forgotten something," he said softly. "Sometimes, kindness is the only thing that saves." Gasps echoed through the chamber. No one had ever spoken to the queen in such a way. The nobles' hearts pounded with fear, expecting death in the next breath. But the queen only stared at him, her silence sharper than any blade. At last, she raised her hand. The floor shook. And new machines rose from hidden panels, taller and stronger than before. They carried weapons that glowed with energy, weapons that could kill with one strike. "This," the Queen declared, "is the final test." She turned her gaze to the girl, her eyes softening for a moment. "Step away, my daughter," she commanded. But the girl shook her head, clinging to the human even tighter. "I will not leave him," she said, her voice trembling but strong. The nobles gasped again, their whispers like a storm. The Queen's jaw tightened, but she did not repeat the order. Instead, she raised her hand once more and the machines advanced. The human stepped in front of the girl, his heart steady despite the danger. He knew he could not fight these machines, not with branches, not with bare hands. But he also knew one truth: he would not run. If this was his end, he would face it protecting her. He closed his eyes, breathing deeply, then opened them again with calm. The machines stopped only a few steps away, their weapons glowing. The Queen's voice thundered, "Tell me, human, why do you fight for her when you gain nothing, when death waits for you at every turn?" The hall held its breath. The human's answer was simple, but each word struck like lightning, because she was afraid and no one else helped her. Silence followed, heavy and endless. The Queen stared at him, her heart shaken though her face remained stone. The girl lifted her small voice, breaking the silence. "He is my protector," she said, her eyes shining with tears. Her words were like a spark in the dark. The nobles stirred, their whispers rising again. A protector, chosen not by crown, not by law, but by the heart of the princess herself. The Queen's chest tightened, old memories stirring within her. She remembered her own youth, the times she had cried, the times no one had come to comfort her. She had built an empire on strength because no one had ever shown her kindness. But now here was her daughter, smiling, laughing, alive again. And it was because of this human. Her pride screamed at her to strike him down, to erase the weakness. But her heart whispered another truth. Perhaps weakness was not what she thought it was. The Queen lowered her hand slowly. The machines froze, their weapons fading to silence. The hall filled with gasps of shock. The human blinked, surprised to still be alive. The girl hugged him tightly, her laughter soft but real. The Queen's eyes softened for a heartbeat, then grew sharp again. She stood tall, her voice ringing, with power. "You have passed my tests, human," she declared. "You have survived where others would have fallen. You have calmed where others brought fear. You have earned what no outsider has ever been given." The nobles shuddered, unable to believe what they were hearing. The Queen's next words shook the hall to its core. "From this day forward, you are guardian of the princess." The princess beamed, clapping her small hands with joy. The human bowed his head, humbled, though he never asked for such a title. The nobles murmured in anger and fear, but none dared speak aloud. The Queen's word was law, unbreakable. The Queen turned away, her cloak flowing like a river of shadows. Her voice dropped to a whisper only she could hear. "Perhaps this human will change more than I expect." Her heart was heavy, but it carried a spark of something she had buried long ago. Hope, the human who changed a throne. The throne room was heavy with silence. The Queen's words still echoed in the air like thunder. "From this day forward, you are guardian of the princess." The nobles bowed their heads, but their eyes burned with disbelief and hidden rage. The guards remained still, their faces unreadable, and the human stood at the center, holding the princess's hand, his heart beating fast. He had never asked for power, never asked for a title, yet one had been forced upon him. The princess smiled, her face glowing with joy. She tugged on his sleeve, whispering softly, "You are mine now." Her small voice filled the hall, and somehow it felt stronger than any command. The human knelt slightly, meeting her eyes. "Yes, little one, I am yours," he said gently. And she hugged him tightly, her laughter ringing once again. That sound carried across the chamber, cutting through the whispers, through the coldness. It was a sound many had forgotten, the laughter of the heir to the empire. The nobles could not accept it. In the corners, Of the hall their whispers rose like poison. "He is a danger," one muttered. "He will change everything," said another. "We must not allow it," hissed a third, but none dared to speak aloud. Not before the queen. Her gaze alone was enough to crush any voice. Yet the seeds of rebellion had already been planted, and everyone knew they would grow. The queen watched her daughter with careful eyes. She saw the joy, the calm, the trust she had long prayed to see. And for the first time in many years, she felt something break inside her iron heart. A softness she thought was long dead. She turned her gaze to the human, her voice cold but steady. "You have changed her," she said. He bowed his head slightly, answering with simple truth. "I only gave her what she needed, someone to stand beside her." The queen's lips pressed together, her pride fighting against her heart. But deep inside, she could not deny it. Her daughter was alive again because of him. Days turned into weeks, and the palace shifted quietly. Where once fear filled the halls, now laughter echoed. Where once the princess hid behind cold walls, now she ran freely with the human. He taught her small games, small lessons. She taught him words of her people, their songs, their ways. Together, they built a bond that no machine, no noble, no law could break, but not everyone welcomed it. The same nobles who had plotted before gathered again, their voices sharp and filled with fire. "This human must be removed," one snarled. "If he grows stronger, if the queen favors him more, we will lose everything." Another said, "We cannot strike him openly, but the shadows are ours," whispered a third. And so the whispers turned into plans. Plans of knives in the dark, poison in the cup, ambush in the night. But the queen knew, she always knew. Nothing in her palace escaped her ears. One evening, she summoned the human alone. The princess was asleep, dreaming peacefully for the first time in years. The queen stood by the great window of her chamber, looking out at the stars. When the human entered, he bowed respectfully, though not out of fear. She turned to him, her voice heavy. "You have made enemies," she said. "They whisper against you. They fear you. They want you gone." The human's voice was calm. "I did not come here to fight them. I came here to protect her." The queen's eyes narrowed, studying him deeply. "And if protecting her means standing against my court, against my laws, even against me?" she asked. His answer was simple, but it carried the weight of truth. "Then I will." For the first time, the queen's mask of stone cracked. Her lips curved in the faintest smile. Though it lasted only a moment, she looked back at the stars, her voice quiet. "Perhaps humanity is more dangerous than I believed. Not because of your weapons, but because of your hearts." The human said nothing, but his silence was answer enough. The next day, the queen called her court together. The nobles gathered, expecting punishment for their whispers. Instead, the queen raised her hand, her voice cutting through them like a blade. "Hear me," she declared. "This human is not your enemy. He is guardian of the princess, chosen not by me, but by fate itself." Her words silenced them, though anger burned in their eyes. But none dared to defy her, because her voice was law, and her law was unbreakable. The human remained by the princess's side, not as a king, not as a ruler, not as one seeking power, but as a protector, as a shield, as a friend. He was only a man, fragile and small, compared to the empire around him, and yet, with simple kindness, he had changed everything. The princess no longer cried. Her laughter filled the palace every day. The guards stood straighter, the servants smiled more often. Even the nobles, though bitter, could not deny the change. An empire once ruled by fear now carried the first spark of hope. High above, the queen sat on her throne, her eyes watching her daughter run with joy. Her heart was heavy, but it was no longer empty. She whispered to herself, words no one else would ever hear. Perhaps strength is not only steel. Perhaps kindness is its own power. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the sound of her daughter's laughter fill her ears. And though she would never admit it aloud, she was grateful. grateful to a human who blew bubbles in a hall of shadows, and in doing so changed a throne.